Hello, everybody. This is Pascal from Neutrality Studies, and today I'm talking again to Arnaud Bertrand, the French geopolitical analyst and prolific Twitter publisher. Arnaud, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Pascal. It's great to be here again.
It's always wonderful having you because you have so much good insights, and your Twitter feed is just a joy. I really the way you take these current events and then actually put them into context is just is very fantastic. So let's maybe start with your home country of France. I already had a talk about it yesterday, but your take on what the current turmoil and the yet another prime minister means for your country.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure there is much more to say beyond it's a mess, really. That we're currently in France, we're in the Fifth Republic, and the way the system, well, the reason why De Gaulle started the Fifth Republic was because before, during the Third or the Fourth Republic, France was extremely unstable and had a new prime minister, every few weeks, and it had much more of a parliamentarian system with new governments all the time, and he wanted to put an end to that and put a bit of stability in the system. But somehow, we've managed to strangely change the spirit of the Fifth Republic to go back to what we were trying to avoid with it, which is a bit of an irony, basically. And yeah, it shows that I don't see how this ends. I think we're simply going to have to wait for the end of Macron's term, which comes in 2027, and expect until then to have new governments probably every couple of months or so. That's probably what will happen given the current divisions in the French Parliament.
Right, it's like dissolving parliament is not an option anymore, right? Calling for new elections.
I forgot exactly about the rule. I think the French Parliament always, I might be wrong, but they always have the option to file what's called a motion of defiance against the government, and they can do that at any point. At least that's what I think. So I think it is still an option, but of course it depends on the on the forces. On the forces in the parliament. So it needs to be a certain threshold of MPs that agree with that in order for that to happen.
Right. And, we've seen there's other political systems which produce a lot of prime ministers. Japan is one of them. They change quite a lot. Right now, we're again going through one of the changes, but it doesn't necessarily mean instability for the country, because A, the bureaucratic arm is very stable and strong, and B, the ruling party and the coalition they form, even though they change prime ministers and cabinet, the overall direction remains more or less the same because the forces are on one page. It's different for France, isn't it?
It's actually not that different. When you look, it should have been different because based on the way the French people voted, the two leading parties that they voted for are either the left. I mean, what I call the left, which is the real left, like Mélenchon and so on, or the far right, meaning Le Pen. If Macron had respected the people's vote, he should have put, either of those two forces in government, but he didn't. He chose to put basically, people from his own family of centrists, like basically the same people who have been ruling France for decades. And that's what is done with each new prime minister, because as a reminder, despite the fact that the parliament can dissolve a government, it's still the president who chooses the new prime minister. So obviously, he's going to choose someone who is quite, close to his beliefs. In fact, the new one that he chose is one of his closest allies. Someone who spent his entire political life with Macron, and so was the one before, François Bayrou, also extremely close to Macron, and so was the guy before. So it goes to show that you change like the figurehead, but actually it's there remains the same ideology, if you will, that's in power.
Yeah, I find it most amusing to hear him say before the vote, I want to hear the voice of the country and of the people because we respect the voice of the people. Therefore, we dissolve parliament and have an election. And once the election was over, he said, like, okay, I heard you and I choose not to listen to you. Thank you very much. This is what's going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
France understands that, right? I mean, this is the general population now gets what kind of leader Macron is toward them, I suppose.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's very unpopular in France, and most people feel betrayed because the first prime minister he chose after that specific vote was actually from the one party that got the least vote, which is especially shocking, right? No one wanted that specific party at all. So yeah, it feels like a betrayal.
Oh, so what does this do to France's position in Europe's overall geopolitics? I mean, over the last 2 months, we've seen like these amazing, to me, kind of amazing portrayals of of European subservience to the United States. I mean, sitting 8 people in the Oval Office in front of the desk of the boss, and still trying to drag the Americans back into Europe, and the US actually saying, look, you have to put the draconian sanctions on China, something that they knew wouldn't be possible for the Europeans, but they put it out there anyway. Where does France fit into this picture at the moment?
I mean, France, to Macron's credit, at least is saying the right things when it comes to this. So, for instance, the new argument, the new deal, sorry, that von der Leyen signed with Trump in Scotland, which is pure imperial tribute, because we Europeans commit to giving some, I think almost $2 trillion, directly to the US, either in buying their energy, their LNG, which is extremely expensive compared to, what it would cost from other countries, Russia first and foremost. And we commit to investing $600 billion in their economy. And the US will decide where that money is invested. It's not even our decision. I mean, it's a series of stuff like that. It's pure imperial tribute. Macron pretty much said so. France, both Macron and the prime minister at the time, François Bayrou, actually had extremely harsh words against that deal. But the fact that they did shows France's position in the EU, because it shows that they completely disagreed with it, but the EU went ahead with it anyhow. So it shows that actually they're not in control of the EU, and it's probably more Germany who is. And in fact, von der Leyen is a German politician. So yeah, I think it's France in the way the European at some points there was talks of a Franco-German couple co-managing the EU, and sort of the idea was that France was the one managing external relations, those types of relationships with the US and so on, trying to find some sort of a third way for Europe that's not completely aligned with the US. That was the case back when Mitterrand was president, or Chirac, and so on. And Germany would be sort of the industrial powerhouse of Europe, managing all the monetary aspects, more the domestic economic stuff at the European level. But that's clearly not the case anymore. France's voice when it comes to external relations of the EU clearly doesn't have much sway anymore.
Right. And you can see how the dependency on the US is now so high that the Europeans are basically begging at the feet of the US to not be let alone, especially when it comes to Ukraine. And in this context, I want to ask you for your interpretation of this media hype. First about some paper drones, then about something that exploded in Poland, and then about the MiG, the Russian these Russian jet fighters that either 8 or 12 minutes crossed Latvian or Estonian airspace.
Yeah.
To me and some people we hear of our colleagues, this seems like a lot of the Europeans, again, trying to hype up the threat in order to maintain the connection to the United States and get them to recommit. How do you interpret this?
So first of all, just to end on the previous thoughts on the fact that there is kind of irony on the paradox that you're right, the Europeans are trying their best to keep the US into the fight, and committing to buy all those weapons from the US in order to seduce Trump and so on. But in the long run, that actually weakens Europe because it even increases our dependence on the US, which means it's going to be even harder the next time around to negotiate from a position of strength when it comes to any deal with the US. The reason why we have to submit to this imperial tribute is because we have no leverage, right? They have complete sway over us. They protect us almost completely, and so they can dictate terms. So it's it's not the right direction. The direction that we should be going towards is reducing the dependence, building our own European armament industry, trying to cut the umbilical cord bit by bit from the US. And then on this question specifically, I think we are quite clearly in a security dilemma dynamic between Europe and Russia, where there is, as you say, threat hyping on both sides. Russia sees European quite rightly as very hostile to them, and then they respond to that, and of course the Europeans interpret that in the worst possible manner, and on bit by bit it's escalating. And the only solution to that, the real solution, should be to dial down the tension, should be dialogue. But here is another paradox: we won't speak directly to Russia. We only do so via Trump, who is himself quite hostile to our interest as Europeans, and who's on the record dozens of times to say that he hates Europe, Europeans, and so on. So obviously, he's not the right person to negotiate for Europe's interests. So it's also stupid. It's to me it makes no sense whatsoever. The strategic thinking of European leaders is appalling.
Is it possible? I mean, Alex Christoforou had that analysis the other day on his channel. Is that what we are seeing is a reaction of Europe to the US decision to not increase militarization in the border states with Russia, in the Baltics, but also in Finland. And in Finland, the U.S. has now an agreement to open up to 15 U.S. Military bases, but they haven't acted on it yet, except for one. The other 14 are nowhere to be found yet, right? So are we actually witnessing a moment when the US seems to be trying to at least not escalate with Russia, and that's something that might worry the Europeans, that their border states are now somehow not as militarized anymore as they thought they would?
I think it's even further than that. I don't know if you saw, but there was a pretty extraordinary Reuters article. I think it was 2 days ago,
Yeah.
where you have a very senior Pentagon official called David Baker, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, or sorry, of War,
Mm.
as they now call it, who told Europeans that he planned to not only not increase but cut off security assistance to the Baltic states and all NATO members bordering Russia, because, and this is a quote from him, the US military is shifting its attention to the defense of the homeland, so retreating to its own hemisphere. I think that's what's going on. I mean, America first, right? I think that the US is tired of playing world policeman, and they want to focus on themselves. I think that's the big picture, and I think you're right that a lot of what we're seeing, including the threat inflation from EU officials, is to try to impress upon the US that they're really needed here, and to get them to stay. And you can hear in the rhetoric of EU officials that they consider getting the US to stay as a big win. That's their mindset. Whereas I personally see the US pulling out as a huge opportunity for Europe to finally be independent. So it's a very, very different mindset. I don't understand theirs. Maybe they probably don't understand mine. But it's they have an extremely Atlantic ideology.
Yeah, I was about to say, like the power of the transatlantic network and mindset thinking is just now under serious threat, and it's under threat from the other side of the Atlantic, which is why these people then portray Trump and the America Firsters as isolationists, because it's like isolating from them, not from the rest of the world. But like Europe is now getting the message that they're not looked on at as an asset anymore. And that must be frightening to people like Mr. Merz from BlackRock and Mr. Macron from, where was he before? Like which investment fund?
Rothschild.
Rothschild.
Yeah.
And, all of the others who are so used that the Americans would court them in order to make sure that Europe is always on the same line. And now it seems that Europe is on the same line. Now Europe is on the line and the US is not anymore. That must be scary to these people.
Yeah, I mean it's like your entire world is shaken, right? That's what they learned at school. Like most of French elites went to the same school, which is Sciences Po, and it's a very Atlanticist thinking school where it's all about the West together as an alliance, dictating terms to the rest of the world, and all of that. And so obviously Trump is in complete ideological opposition to that. I was reading a very interesting Chinese theorist the other day called Mao Koji, who actually compared it to the ideological war that led to the split, the Sino-Soviet split, right? which was a bit similar. It was also around ideology, that China was going a certain direction, the Soviet Union was going into another, and at some point there was no meeting of mind anymore. Those things can happen, right? And I think that's what's happening. Um, and the US wants to split quite clearly, but Europeans are oddly resisting it.
The Euro-American split. So the question is, who will be the Kissinger from the other side who goes over and negotiates that? And because like the difference in the dynamic is that I don't think either Russia nor China will currently have an interest in creating too close of a relationship again with the United States, right? The dynamic is going to be necessarily different.
I'm not that sure. So first of all, Kissinger didn't negotiate the Sino-Soviet split. He actually benefited from it years afterwards, right?
Right.
And it was purely, organic between them. And probably something similar might happen here. You're actually seeing a lot of signs that China is getting on much better terms with the US, like some really strange signs. Like, I don't know if you read the transcripts of the Xi-Trump call that just happened 4 days ago. Like, the language in the Chinese transcript is the most positive language in a Chinese transcript of a Xi US president call in at least a decade. Like, they were calling it, very positive, constructive, pragmatic, candid, a lot of superlative words that they normally don't use. Like, I compared it to previous transcripts of, the few previous transcripts. Normally it's very business-like. They don't use any sort of emotional terms like positive and so on. That one was very different.
Sorry, is it a transcript of what was said, or is it a readout of the Chinese talking about how good
a transcript of the official Chinese Foreign Ministry transcript of the call, like you have every time on both sides, right? And Trump also on his side was very positive. The American transcript was a post by Trump on Truth Social, because that's how it's done these days. But he called it like a very good one.
Okay.
So there is that. Currently, right now, there is a bipartisan Congress delegation in China, bipartisan from Congress, even though Congress is normally much more hawkish against China than the executive branch. And that's the first time House delegation goes to China in over 6 years. So you're seeing stuff that shows the relationship is definitely improving. And then there was the Lai Ching-te move that was earlier. I mean, you probably saw that, where Lai Ching-te, the president of the Republic of China, Taiwan, was denied passage in the US. He normally, when it goes to South America, because there are a couple of countries, maybe one or two, that still recognize them as the legitimate government of China, normally passes through the US because this plane cannot do it in one time. But for the first time in history, the US denied that, which is clearly an accommodation of China.
Yeah. And 6 days ago, the news was out that Donald Trump did not approve a $400 million arms sale to Taiwan. So that one as well. I mean, okay, so that's interesting. I missed that this kind of under the hood diplomacy is going on with China. So there's a chance that we're seeing a new strategy emerge. I mean, on the other hand, it could all be just like, the good old schmoozing and pretending that you're best buddies just in order then to come out with another like 5 million tariff on China, because it's at the same time you still have what are the Blumenthal and Graham, right? Who with their idea of bone crushing sanctions on China if they don't stop buying Russian oil. So is that a different faction, or is this even like something like a decoy for the Europeans to still think that everything's on course?
I mean, I think they can't be thinking that the Europeans will do that because that's, the European economy is already doing bad. That will completely crush it. So it's more something that it's more like a dare, right? Where you tell the Europeans, oh, okay, you want us to do more, but well, then do your part, do that and that and that, and you say impossible stuff that they're never gonna do, like those 100% tariffs on China and so on, which is a way of saying like we're not gonna do it basically, but to put the onus on the Europeans rather than the Americans. That's more the way I see it, if that makes sense.
Right, right. So that's the pressure that the US puts on Europe to put their sanctions. But Graham and Blumenthal still have this threat of like the US putting sanctions, 100% sanctions on China. But that one is in the back burner, and apparently, well, Trump is not in favor of it at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what they did it, right? They did it.
Yeah,
they saw what happened. So that's unrealistic. I think they went up to what was it, 145 or 35, and then there was a tug of war, and on the US had to back down. And that's probably also what Trump is recognizing. That's Trump only respects power. If there is one lesson from Trump, is that he's someone who respects strength and power. And he's basically, I mean, that's my take. He's basically seeing that China has actually a lot of leverage, a lot of power, and so he's trying his best to it's the language he's starting to speak is the language of coexistence, deal making, accommodation, trying to find each power trying to find their own space. He's not talking like the Biden administration was about winning. He's talking about coexisting. Like in the transcript of the Trump call, he said something like the US and China will have very long, very productive relationship like forever, and we're gonna both act in concert for world peace and so on. Like that's the language of partnership, not the language of zero-sum competition. So I think that is the shift that's happening.
That, I mean, if that shift was there to stick, that would be encouraging. The problem is that Donald Trump can change his mind over the course of a night, and claim that it always was that way.
Of course.
Anyhow, maybe let's shift a little bit though to what the US did to its own power, because in my view, the US, especially in West Asia, in the Middle East, it diminishes its power quite a lot by allowing things like an Israeli strike on Qatar. It's like one of these latest norm-breaking moments that I couldn't believe that, the US would allow an ally to be attacked by another ally. It's like, okay, seems like one bridge too far, but it happened. And sure enough, although this has been certainly negotiated before, but sure enough, we now have a new alliance in the region, which is Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And again, this was certainly negotiated over a year or more. But what do you make out of this new configuration now? Because I do think this impacts the region.
I think it massively impacts the region. I think it's a huge deal, and I think indeed it was negotiated for years. At least that's what the press reported. First of all, it is a huge deal in that the US didn't prevent it from happening, which is a bit of a mystery. Like, does that mean they agree with it? Does that mean they couldn't prevent it? What does that mean exactly? But I think that in and of itself is very meaningful. because you would think that they wouldn't want that to happen, because that means effectively that there is a second nuclear bloc in the Middle East. There is now the US-Israel bloc, and now there is the Pakistan Saudi bloc, and this deal does include nuclear, based on statements by Saudi official. Like one Saudi official, I think, was quoted in Al Jazeera saying that it included all types of armaments. So it clearly means that there is some sort of nuclear umbrella from Pakistan when it comes to Saudi Arabia, and a reminder that Pakistan has a no first use nuclear policy, meaning they can use nuclear preventively. So that's quite a deterrent, right? So that's one thing. And there is also a China dimension, because Pakistan is, of course, probably China's closest friend, even more so than Russia. They call each other Iron Brothers. 81% of Pakistan's weapon imports come from China. So the militaries have very close ties. So now you have, Saudi Arabia that's effectively defended by Chinese weapons, and we've seen those weapons in the recent, conflict between Pakistan and India. We've seen that they're very effective. Yeah, so that changes the dynamic quite a bit.
It does. Could it be that one of the calculations on the other side, or on all sides, has a lot to do with Iran? Because Pakistan also had very friendly things to say about Iran back when it was caught up in in this 12-day war with Israel. And Iran and Saudi Arabia have, of course, historically been really adversaries to each other. Only China managed to broker basically the resumption of diplomatic relations again, and we see a thawing, right? We saw how the ministers of defense visited each other recently, but still, I mean, the rivalry and the Sunni Shia rivalry between the two is not gone. So
Yeah.
could it be that the idea was to say, like, look, the United States, who would you rather we have a treaty with the Saudis or with the Iranians?
Maybe that's what the Pakistanis told Trump. I don't know. Maybe that's the way they convinced him. And indeed, I think this is. I think there are probably quite a few people this is bad news for. Iran is one of them, because now it means that that they have obviously the US and Israel on one side, but now they have potentially a nuclear-backed Saudi Arabia as well. And despite the recent warming, like you say, there is still the historical enmity, which means that Iran should have little. I mean, if I was them, I would put enormous energy to try to develop nuclear weapons immediately, because effectively there are three big powers in the Middle East, like the Saudis, Israel, and them. And they're the only ones without nuclear weapons. It's not a very good place to be, right? So yeah, it puts them in quite a tough spot. So yeah, but we can only speculate. We don't know what's behind this deal, or maybe the plan at some point is to do a broader alliance, and maybe Iran could join it, although that's way less likely. It seems a bit implausible, but who knows? Stranger things have happened.
That is true. I mean, you're right. I also think that for Iran, this is, well, not a loss, but it complicates the picture for them quite a bit, because there was, like, all of these friendly words from Pakistan, and it's questionable whether any kind of such political maneuvering would still be possible. On the other hand, another player who has no interest whatsoever in an unstable or even in a balkanized Iran is China, right? So China tried to have a pacifying influence on the entire situation. Do you have any indications for how China is trying to approach the Iran question? Because right now, especially in our corner of the internet, a lot of people are saying, look, the next phase of the war, the US-Iran war, is just a matter of when. And yeah, Netanyahu pushes for this like crazy. And right now there's the negotiations, of course, with the snapback sanctions, which is taking place right this week. What's your take on that?
I think I have seen quite credible report that China did deliver after the war quite a lot of weapons to Iran in order to strengthen their defense. It looks quite credible to me. So I think they are concerned, and I think they are trying to help in that way. And it seemed to be quite advanced stuff as a deterrent, I guess, in order to prevent something, another attack. So yeah, that's the most, I guess, relevant thing that I've seen on what China is trying to do here. And of course, they help also a lot in economic terms, buying all of Iran's oil, and they built also quite recently a train line that became operational actually right before the war, if I'm not mistaken, to more easily trade with Iran, which would help their economic situation as well. So I think they are trying to help in various ways.
Right. And on the other hand, we do see how Iran is being more and more encircled, right? With Syria basically out of the picture. That's already for over half a year, almost a year now. The Sangizur corridor going to be under U.S. management between Azerbaijan and Armenia. I mean, in Armenia, between Azerbaijan and the rest of Azerbaijan, right, on the west, at the border of Iran. And the relationship with China doesn't look as if though Iran wants to increase it. So are we seeing Iran being more and more isolated in its part?
Uh, uh, it's hard to say. I'm not an Iran specialist. I don't know the internal dynamics. I know there is a more pro-West faction that's always at the hope of developing ties with the West, doing a deal like they did in the Obama years and so on. I would think that that faction completely lost the arguments, right? But that's just me speculating based on logic. You would think they will try to develop relationship as much as they can with powers in the global south that can actually help them, but I don't know enough of the internal dynamic to make a call.
Right. Then let's maybe talk a little bit now toward the end about East and Southeast Asia. We have seen, especially in Nepal, large protests, right? And so immediately when I saw that, my question was, oh my God, is that another color revolution being instigated? You took a position saying like it doesn't look like it, which put you at odds with other analysts. But what's your take at the Nepal situation?
So first of all, Nepal is a country that I care quite a lot for because I used to live there actually, and my first child was conceived in Nepal. So
Happy place.
yeah. So during the earthquake, by the way, the 2015 earthquake, so I have strong emotional connection to the country. I still know a lot of people there, and I know especially that for having lived there, that it is a very corrupt place, and that the population is extremely unsatisfied about the corruption and the nepotism and so on. So my first instinct when I saw those protests was not that it was a color revolution; it was that it was genuine. And also, it's worth knowing that Nepal is actually a very revolutionary country. Like there are those types of protests, of revolutions going on quite often. And not that long ago, the country had a 10-year-long civil war. That I think it was from 1996 to 2006. So it's politically speaking, it's not the most stable country in the world. So people protesting, trying to overthrow the government, and so on, is not that surprising in the country. And um, and I think there is also no clear reason why there will be a color revolution in Nepal. It's not, it's a very poor country that's landlocked between India and China. That's actually completely dependent on India for everything, which I personally actually experienced, because after the earthquake there was a blockade by India. Not related to the earthquake, but to a change in constitution that they didn't like, and it completely paralyzed the country. So India has complete power almost over the country. So why would you want to have a pro-US government there when anyway India controls the country and they can switch off supplies from one day to the other, and there is nothing that the US could do about it. So there is no clear reason why. And if you listen to the arguments from those who think there was a color revolution, you hear a lot of different arguments. Like they all have their own explanation. Some say it's about water, some say it's to prevent an indigenous tech ecosystem, others say it's just chaos for chaos sake, which shows that there is no clear reason, because everyone has a different one. And the current Nepalese government wasn't especially anti-US. In fact, I looked. They had met during the summer with someone from the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which is one of those big soft power US organization to build strategic US projects in Nepal, and it looked like the discussion had gone well. So there was no why would they replace that government, especially when the new leader of Nepal, Sushila Karki, which is a 73 years old grandmother, she's not noticeably more pro-US than the previous guy. Profile is very rooted in Nepal. She has never worked abroad. She has not even studied in the West. She studied in Nepal and in India. And she's like a true old school Nepal revolutionary. She participated in overthrowing the monarchy. I think her husband went to jail because he hijacked a plane in order to overthrow the monarchy and so on. So it's not the profile of Western puppet at all. So yeah, that's basically it doesn't make sense to me. And then I also looked. I think there is a principle of justice, which is that the burden of proof lies with the accuser. So if you make an accusation that there is a color revolution, produce some evidence, some proof. I'm not entirely close to the idea actually, but
Right.
I have to see some actual proof. Like in Hong Kong, for instance, we saw proof. Like there was, photos of meetings between the protest leader and people from the U.S. consulate, and then you had all Western media cheering the protesters in Hong Kong, and you had U.S. congressmen, holding sessions to support them, and so on and so forth. Like there was a huge enthusiasm in the West for those protests, but here there is none of that. In fact, if you look at the way the Western media presented the protests, it was more negative than positive. We saw all the image of destructions of the Nepalese parliament. We saw the people killed. It was like there was no clear sign that the West was happy at all about those protests, and I didn't see any concrete proof that it was a color revolution. Like there was only like circumstantial evidence that could be made about virtually any protest in the world. Like some stuff they were saying is, yeah, but one of the organizations that was participating in the protest got funding from students. No, not directly from NED even. From an organization that itself is funded by the NED. And I was thinking the same argument could be made about any protest in France, for instance. Like in France, all the protests, we have associations, organizations that participate in those, that are also very much into the Tibet cause, for instance. And so, of course, they're associated with organizations, pro-Tibet organizations, which are funded by the US. But that doesn't mean that every protest in France is a color revolution. Like that's not evidence at all. So yeah, when you put all of that together, I just don't see it.
Yeah, this is one of the moments when we need to be careful to not fall into what Edward Snowden warned about, that out of good reasons, we start to see patterns too much. I mean, although there are patterns and although there are power networks, not everything that looks like a nod is necessarily one. So the question though is whether this form of we've seen how the US has been using subversive mechanisms and funding of civil society and building up civil society institutions. I mean, I think Ukraine is a model case, right?
Sure.
Of over time, like funneling money and nurturing also not only politicians but civil society and media institutions that then at strategic points can be deployed if they're all brought on into the same boat at the same time. And these organizations, they do have ties into almost every country, as you said, including France. Question is, how important are they in the overall structure of the societies we're talking about? And so your argument is that in Nepal, it's just not likely that the influence would be that strong, and even if it was, what end it would be used to in order to topple the previous government was not.
Yeah, I mean, those organizations do invest, I mean, everywhere, in every country, and so they invested in Nepal. But I actually looked at the funding for that. They actually invested much more on the side, if you can call it so, of the government, trying to get favor with existing politicians in Nepal. Like, there was a huge project, for instance, last year by the NED of basically supporting existing Nepalese political parties of 500,000 K. So I don't know where that money went. Maybe it's part of the corruption. Maybe it's legit. I don't know. But when you compare that with the money that went to the protesters, it's I did the calculation. It's 6 times more on the side of the politicians. So if you look at the money, you can actually probably make a stronger case that they were more encouraging the problem that the protesters were protesting against, which was corruption and politicians getting money from various sources, including foreign funding, and not using it for the good of the country, but just pocketing it and spending it on lavish trips abroad with their kids and so on and so forth. So that's what you need to consider. Like funding by the U.S. government is not necessarily doesn't necessarily mean color revolution. Or let's take another example. Currently in the Philippines, there are also huge anti-corruption protests, very similar to those in Nepal, with tens of thousands of youth on the streets. That country, the Philippines, has exponentially more US influence than Nepal. I mean, it was a former US colony. Many people could argue it's still in some shape or form a US colony. But the current government is extremely US friendly. Like Bongbong Marcos, the son of the previous dictator, extremely friendly to the US, extremely hostile to China. I mean, we've all seen the images of the fight in the South China Sea between the Philippines and that government, and so on and so forth. So, you can't make the argument there that there will be a color revolution. You can see that young people can genuinely oppose corruption, even though it is a country that is also extremely influenced and infiltrated by the US. So it goes to show that there is no, it's not automatic, right?
No, it's not automatic, and that's what's difficult then to judge, especially from far away. Maybe just in finishing, like, what is the one thing that you're keeping the closest eye on at the moment in terms of world politics? Anything on the horizon that you think will be very interesting to look at in the next couple of days or weeks?
I think what we were speaking earlier, the development of the China-US relationship and I think we may be witnessing the start of some sort of pivot after it's Trump. Like you said, the guy can change his mind from one day to the next, but it's certainly interesting to see that things are improving. It's objectively a good thing for the world if the two great powers are in better terms. And I'm also following Europe quite a bit, but the picture is much more depressing there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was there in August, and it's still a nice continent to visit, but it's like the politics of it just makes you either laugh or cry or both at the same time. But
yeah, I mean, I spent my whole summer there. I was in France, I was in Belgium, I was in Holland. And some places are doing better than others. Actually, Belgium and Holland are doing great. Very vibrant economy. As far as I could see, France is doing much less well. But still, I think that if you just look at the numbers, it's objectively quite a depressed place. In economic terms, also in people's mindsets, and with what's going on, it's not going to improve.
it's just not a very hopeful place. I mean, SEO and BRICS and so on is like all the hopes and the future, what we can build. And Europe is all like, oh, how do we get back to the good old 1960s when we knew what was happening? Oh, well. Arnaud, people want to follow you should definitely go to your Twitter. I will put the link into the description below. Any other place to find you? Substack, of course, but
yeah, Substack, Twitter. That's basically it.
I'll put it into the description below. Arnaud Bertrand, thank you very much for your time today.